Hello.
How are you? Hi, Yuju. Hi, Christos. Uta. Hi, friend.
Oh,
Sanji.
Hello.
Philip.
hi. As you all are coming in, you've probably gotten the warning already, but just want to let you know that we are live streaming this on YouTube. The live stream is just about 15 seconds behind us live. So as people join there, 5 people are watching there now. So they won't have the opportunity to be in the breakout rooms or be in the fishbowl with us as you all will, but we had so many people disappointed that we thought we would sort of open up the balcony, like the balcony in a movie theater. Those are the folks in the live stream. They're in the balcony.
Standing room only,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. Great. Loving to see what you all are putting in the chat about what brought you here. Just picking up a couple of these things. Pete, who I haven't seen you in a long time, Pete. This is a conversation right up our alley. And he says, excited, always like talking about the spiral concepts with others who are aware of them and can't wait to hear the insights. Me neither. Yeah, great.
Hey, Thomas, Elena, Melissa. Welcome in.
Yeah. And Mila says, tired of people confusing strictly following frameworks with adopting. Whoa, that was a big, with a, Dove's one just blew it out of the, with adopting principles that help
I just
deliver
pasted
customer
something I
value.
shouldn't have, but please ignore it.
That's okay. There you go. Yeah, we got Dove's love note to someone else there. There you go. Oh, okay. And Colin says he's here and a little weary of Agile being conflated to a process. Gillian is tired and just awake and curious. Well, Susan, do you want to start moving into formally opening this? And we've already gotten the comments going with people talking to each other in the chat and saying hi and all that. And just wonder if we want to get.
Yeah, I think that would be
moving.
great. I think
Yeah.
as I think we all know that we've got 90 minutes here, but it's never going to be enough. So let's take every little morsel of time that we can.
Absolutely. And I am just really thrilled to see you all live here with us. And we decided to live stream this, and so other people are joining over there on YouTube. You know, Susan and I have been friends for a number of years. I would say that we were pandemic pals. We were sort of aware of one another prior to the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, we started meeting once a month, and we would sort of be each other's sanity. Would you say that? Or maybe a pal in the insanity? Susan.
Yeah, one of those things. I think that I always looked forward to our connections because I knew that I'd feel better afterwards. Or not.
Yeah, or at least it was real, right?
Totally.
And that's how I felt about it too. I became aware of Susan when I went to New Zealand, and I got introduced to her. She's the author of a number of books, and the latest one is called Lead Together. And so she's been on the leading edge of the future of work community for some time. And lo and behold, when we met, she said, you don't know it, but you're the big inspiration for this. And I didn't know. So what was that for you, Susan?
I mean, it's funny the way that it works. I think it was 2015 was kind of my liminal year. I'd left corporate life for the last time. Had picked up reinventing organizations and re-engaged myself with spiral dynamics. And I was reading an everyone culture. And my beloved husband is an Agile coach. So you had your books have always been in my eyesight, and I kind of always vaguely knew about you. But when you and Michael Spade came and spoke at Agile New Zealand in 2015, all of a sudden I had this connection point because the two of you, again, unbeknownst to you, I kind of sparked the whole imagination for reinventing organizations in New Zealand, because you were talking very specifically about the impact that that book had had on you, and I guess, almost presupposing the theme of this around what is the promise of, if these two ways of being with work could be closer together, what would be possible. So yeah, that as a, spent all of my career in tech, kind of got my Scrum Mistress certification in 2009. So being on both the fringes of the Agile community and now the future of work, you lit the spark in New Zealand for sure. So I'm always indebted to you for that. And then when I had the opportunity to meet you, it was like we were sisters. And yeah, we've been exploring these conversations and many, many deep ones ever since. And so why don't you talk about, Lisa, about why this topic and why now, and why in this format at the Greaterthan Jamboree?
Yeah. So I'm really happy that this is being hosted inside of the Crucible and the fun summer festival, really, of the Greaterthan Jamboree, because the Greaterthan Jamboree has the idea of, hey, if there's something on the edge that you want to do, this is a great community to come do it with. And so that's what we're doing. Susan and I are doing something on the edge. And it really arose from a conversation we had where I was talking about disappointment, and maybe I would even say despair, a despair that I feel about what I saw and still see as the promise of Agile, not alone, but in concert with other things, like maybe Agile is one of the streams moving to a larger river. And that river is a more meaningful and purposeful and sustainable and joyful and thriving way of being in the work world, basically. And so we just, within about 5 minutes decided to host this, and the description came really quickly, and here we are today. We want to just give you a little bit of like the framing of why we think there is a Teal promise in Agile, and how we want to start to frame how this session is going to go. And then we're going to have you be in breakout groups so that you can start talking about this topic too, like your own take on it. And then when we come back from breakout groups, we're going to have a fishbowl where there'll be Susan and I and a couple of you. And then Susan is going to give you much more details about how the fishbowl is going to work well. And if you are on the live stream, you are very welcome. We're glad you're here, and you're sort of in the balcony watching us. And I imagine that we are sitting around some sort of communal fire, and there's sort of this ring right around the fire, but then there are these other rings of humans beyond that holding the conversation that's happening in the center. And so that's the imagery I want to evoke. And Susan just did something I really want to encourage. Like if you hear something that resonates with you, you can tap your heart, or you can do your hands like this, and it will help us all be in the same space together. So feel free to show what's happening for you as we go through. All right, so let me just tell you about my point of view on Agile and Teal and future work and all this hoo-ha. My work now sits at an intersection, and there are 4 streets coming into this intersection. So maybe it's a quad fork in the road even. So the pieces of it are Agile, the future of organizational life, adult human development, and societal evolution. Those are the things I am really passionate about bringing together and seeing what happens when we consider those things to be participating with one another. And the question I always ask myself is like, if it's no accident that Agile emerged now, what's it all about? What is it here to do? And I'm pretty sure it's not here to pump shit out faster. I'm pretty sure that's not the main purpose for Agile. And so we talk about there being a Teal promise. And I remember encountering Frederick Laloux's book, which then sent me and my co-founder of Agile Coaching Institute, Michael Spade actually had already known about this. He brought it to me, which is the depth of the field and the model called spiral dynamics that underlies the work that Frederick Laloux did. He took it and built on it. And so many Agilists think that those colors in the Laloux book are Laloux's model. He absolutely added to the state of the art. But what I want to impress upon everyone is that there is much more depth. And when I look at the depth and I look at what I believe Agile is here to do, I see a lot of consistency. So the spiral dynamics color is called yellow at the level that Frederick Laloux called it teal. So when you look up spiral dynamics integral, when you go look for images of this thing, you're going to see yellow, and that equals teal. Okay. But yellow, at the level of yellow, our mindset is that change is the norm. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I kind of think Agile is here to help us metabolize change. That is consistent with what I think Agile is here to do. At the level of yellow, we're okay with uncertainty because guess what? Emergence works. And we're actually willing to rely on emergence. I'm like, okay, yeah, emergence, empiricism, inspection, adaptation, those are Agile things. At the level of yellow, we're learning and constantly adjusting. Like, where have I heard that before? You know, that's something we're trying out through the Agile practices. And then when the Laloux book came out, you know, and I remember us sort of introducing this to the people that we were teaching at the time, because we were doing a lot of development of Agile coaches at the time. This was 2014, 2015, like Susan said. And we would say things like, Teal, self-organizing teams. Where have I heard this before? You know, Teal, coaches with no management authority. Where have I heard that before? So it's not necessarily that Teal is the end all be all, and we should all be striving toward that. In fact, if we're striving toward anything, that is a signal that we are trapped in an unhealthy orange, belief system. We've got to strive and make it happen. So it's not the end all be all, but I would say that what Teal has given us is a basket of characteristics to look at, you know, and the question of, do we want our organizations to be more like this basket of characteristics? And they turn out to be remarkably in concert with the depth of what Agile is trying to deliver, with what those practices that we usually start with in Agile, you know, those practices that are trying to express the principles and values up underneath, all of that's in concert with what could emerge as we continue to evolve ourselves individually and as a society. And that's what the spiral dynamics model is telling us about. So that's why I think it has a Teal promise. And I'm really most interested in the question of, like, so why haven't we seen more of that yet? You know, it's a question I'm in deep inquiry about myself. I don't have an answer. I have some hypotheses. So Susan.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I even shy away from the word teal because it can be quite polarizing. For those of you that tracked the comments in Lisa's original post around this, you know, seeing the provocative questions, you know, there is no such thing as teal. Why would anybody want to be a color? Teal is a destination. What's the next thing? So many confusing perspectives of, you know, what does a color have to do with anything? And of course, it's just a way of looking at the world that brings together a set of patterns that can help us make sense of what might be happening in our culture and environment at any one given at any given place and time. And so for me, I've over the years gone up and down from being really triggered and frustrated by the moniker, and then being really relaxed, because it's like, okay, we're here now. Oh, now we're not. And for me, the dynamism of our amazing ability as humans to move up and down and sideways and around and maybe stand above it for a second and look down is, so precious and so unique, right? And anybody that knows anything about my work will have heard me say how curious I feel it is that in the 150 years since the Industrial Revolution and scientific management, most organizations have been ascribing to this model of organizing that is coercive, causes suffering, assumes things about people and their capabilities. And this in, a lived reality of so much quote unquote progress in so many other areas. And I guess for me, the heart of my inquiry is trying to understand why people are okay with that, right? How they can, we're all swimming in this water. And for some reason, for most organizations and most humans, it feels like it's in the too hard basket to even look at what's happening and sink into the reality of, quote that I kind of think about every day from the late David Graeber, is that the ultimate truth of the world is that it's something that we make and could just as easily make differently. And yeah, I know that all of this sounds quite like OTT and ephemeral and amorphous, but I think that that's what happened with Agile, right? Having been in the tech space since the 1980s, what a miracle it was, where teams could come together and look each other in the eye every morning and talk about their successes and their failures and what they want to do tomorrow and how they can support each other. How this idea of iteration may not, at its face, look like it can lead to emergence. But once you have that experience, you cannot unhave that experience. And if we talk about, from my perspective, the three things that is one of the set of three things that is at the heart of Lalu's work is this idea of the intersection of autonomy, agency, and connectedness. And I think that the practice of Agile brings all of those things. But my hypothesis is, potentially why it hasn't gone any farther or reached its quote unquote Teal promise is that for most individuals, the process and practice of Agile is built around an object, and that object is what you're building. It has very little to do with this. And so if you're continually projecting your practices and your rituals and your way of thinking about work onto an object and not reflecting it back on yourself, I think that stymies and somehow stifles what could be possible. So that's kind of at the core of my hypothesis, this overlap between maybe being, as we're at work, we're busy, we've been taught to believe that work is not a place for our personal human development, even though it totally is, because it gives us all the raw fodder to do that work. We're taught to believe that that's not the place to do that. And that combined with this striving for codifying everything as soon as possible, where we're not comfortable to sit in the mess of complexity long enough to actually see what's emerging. So yeah, my hypothesis is that our somehow either willful blindness, disbelief, or feeling too afraid that the workplace is someplace for our human development, and our willingness or our persistent need as a society to codify everything, give it steps, give it a recipe before it's ready. Yeah.
That's a hypothesis, all right. Yeah. So we are interested in your hypotheses, and that's what we're really wanting to create the space for hearing lots of different ideas. We said we're in the middle. I said, I'm in the middle of this inquiry myself. And you just heard Susan. She's got a hypothesis. She doesn't have an answer. I don't have an answer either. But I do know that we together can enliven one another's inquiry and can, maybe walk out of this session with just a different thing we hadn't thought about before, or something that just sort of gets under our skin and niggles at us for the next little while and then creates something new. And so that's what we're trying to do here. So if you came for an answer, you're going to be bitterly disappointed. But I'm pretty sure you're used to that bitter disappointment already, because there are very few straight on answers to the quandaries that we're in this era of exponential change and volatility, basically. So I think what we want to do is get you started talking about it and get you started talking about it in smaller groups. So we're going to put you into breakout groups, small groups, no more than 4 people, could be less. And the idea is just to have this sharing. What we're trying to do here is a sharing more than a conversation, and we're definitely not trying to do point counterpoint, challenge, debate, that sort of thing. All that can come later, maybe. We're going to generate ideas. We want to mine the depths of your heart and your mind around this topic. So we'll put you into breakout rooms for 10 minutes. You get to meet some other people from around the world and just have a little conversation about this topic. If you buy into the notion that Agile had or has a Teal promise, then why hasn't it lived into it or up to it yet?
All right, we're ready to go. Have fun, people. See you back here in 10 minutes.
Welcome back as you're coming back from your breakouts.
It's always such a tell for me that when people come back from breakouts, even with a tiny little smile on their face.
We hope it was good to talk to a couple other people, maybe meet someone new.
Nice. All right, so we are going to move into fishbowl style for the rest of our time together. And I'm getting an echo now again.
Oh, that's me.
Okay, that's better. So who here has done a fishbowl on Zoom? Just a little show of hands. Yes, no, yes, a few people. So the way that we are going to, first of all, explain what a fishbowl is. So a fishbowl is a practice by which a few people have a conversation and other people witness. And if you're imagining it in real life, it could be bringing 5 or 6 chairs to the center of a circle, a couple of hosts in to kick off the conversation, and then 3 spare chairs for anybody in the outer ring or the outer circle to come in and join the conversation. And when I say come in and join the conversation, it could be to come in because you've got a reflection or reaction or a question that you'd like to share, either that's in direct response to what's happening inside the circle, or if there's the appropriate pause, or you're building on something that is missing from the conversation. So you come in and join the fishbowl, ask your question, share your response. And when you feel complete in that, the invitation is for you to come back out of the fishbowl and then leave the chair open for somebody else. So there will be 5 chairs open at any one time. And the way that it works in Zoom is, let's do this collectively. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is turn off your video. So find your stop video or turn off your video, any way that you do. And then the easiest way that I found to do this is down at the bottom of your Zoom box or bar, where it says start video now, click the little up arrow next to that and click where it says video settings. and then you should see your face and scroll down a tiny bit on this new dialog box and click the box that says hide non-video participants. All right. And if you make sure that you're still in gallery view, right? We should all now, all of a sudden, be able to see nobody else. So then the invitation is and I don't know how this is going to work. I'm going to turn my video back on. Can I invite the quickest 3 or 4 others to turn their videos back on?
Oh, Pete.
There we go. The
5.
Sajni. Yeah, great. So the spots are taken. I think that everybody has got it, and we're here now. So the invitation is that if, we'll self-manage, self-organize ourselves. If you hit the button too quickly or too slowly, the idea is let's just try to make sure that we've got 5 seats taken at any one time. All right. So Lisa, what do you think? Shall we start?
Yeah. I don't think I really shared my hypothesis about this yet. So maybe I will start to kick us off that way. And then I'm just so curious to hear everyone else's. So my hypothesis about why Agile hasn't reached its Teal promise, and I always like in my own mind, there's parentheses, it says yet after that. I think you alluded to it, but I want to build on it, Susan. It's like you alluded to it being sort of an inner game. And if we're fixated on an object, then it becomes much more about the doing of it. And it becomes sort of like a flat land. It doesn't have depth or meaning. And I think that the inner work is even more challenging because the very premise of people's entire work lives is being challenged with Teal and this sort of little agile rivulet that's coming into the future of work river. And specifically, the things that are being challenged are, number one, that we can predict things and control them. Boy, have we ever been shown we can't do that recently. And the other is that I'm safe if I'm right and smart. I think that's another major belief system, like an underlying assumption that motivates people's behavior that is really, really challenged. Now, I suppose the good news is, if there is good news, is that the volatility of our current world keeps serving up all kinds of fresh experiences for people to help them see that the things they clung to for safety are actually not that safe anyway. You might as well let go of riverbanks and join everyone else in the river and come into a different kind of security, one that's not based on being right and looking good and being smart and being the expert, and definitely one that's not based on knowing what's going to happen and just controlling it all till the very end. I think there's a lot of suffering with that. Yeah. So that's my hypothesis, and the depth of the suffering is what really catches my attention often.
I totally agree with that, Lisa, and I think just to build on that, again, there are power dynamics built into the organization mores of an agile setup, right? Like you and I were talking earlier, like the power bestowed on the product manager is oftentimes seen as disproportionate, right? But we're not talking about what's actually happening with the power and the other dynamics in the system. We're just saying, okay, this is what the manual tells us to do. And I'd just love to hear how you'd respond to that.
I want to hang on to that. So this power dynamics conversation feels really important, but I'm aware we haven't heard from these other beautiful souls who were quick on the draw to get into the fishbowl. So I'm curious about other hypotheses that you all may have or questions you might have. And let's not forget this power dynamics thing, because I think it definitely is related to why Agile hasn't sort of flourished as much as I'd hoped. Is that okay, Susan? Yeah, great.
Hey, I have a kind of hypothesis that I guess builds on what you're saying, Lisa, in that I feel that at the crux of the relationship between Agile and Teal is this ability to allow for emergence. Because when I think about Agile software development, it's about iteration and not knowing necessarily what the end game is and not knowing necessarily where the destination is, and to be able to let go of that. And I feel that if leaders are able to do that with their organizations and to say, okay, I'm going to listen to the organization, the collection of people that I've brought together or that we have come together in this organization, and almost as an organism make that decision holistically, I feel like that's maybe at the core and the biggest similarity that I see between Agile and Teal actually, is this idea of emergence or iteration or not knowing the destination. And I feel like that can be very scary for people to like surrender to the chaos. It's almost Taoist to say, okay, step by step, I'm going to climb this mountain, but I don't know which path I'm going to take yet. I just know that there is a light illuminating the step that I have to take next. And that's what I think is the challenge with and with proper Agile as well.
What do you think? I'm curious, Sanjay, what do you think why is it different? And why are leaders able to let go and live into that space when it comes to production of an object, software, but they can't make that leap into that, even just for how we're organized to do this or what we think our strategy is? What do you think is the rub of that gap or that gulf?
I think that's a great question. I think there's a lot of peer pressure maybe to look like you know where you're going as a leader. And I think being able to admit and say, hey, I don't know where this is going is probably quite scary. And then also we look at things like financial funding and sources of funding and where that comes from. And if it's a listed company, for example, you can't just turn to your shareholders and say, look, I don't really know where this is going, because we have a whole system that's built on, being able to predict what's going to happen and being able to give people reassurance and safety and business plans. But business plans mean nothing really. Like, you got to really just rely on the people being good. But that's just not how funding operates. I think that could be a big part of it, but there's going to be many aspects to it. What do you think, Dov?
I think a lot of things. So when you said the Taoist, like it clicked in me, because my biggest inspiration in the last 6-7 years is Tao. And I have a podcast called the Agile Tao, where I talk about agility from the perspective of that book. So what I wanted to say is, through that lens, the more things are tangible, the less they are significant. And organizations are structures that are addicted to tangible things, are addicted to KPIs, are addicted to predefined processes. They wouldn't mind changing perhaps their process to see if a better process suits them. But to say, let's let the process emerge, and that for a process to emerge in a company that has thousands of people, you have to allow teams to have their own emergence. You can't have processes emerge in a huge organization. So it's a scary thing. Right? To just imagine now you tell all the cells in your body, forget how we organize, go for it.
Sounds like chaos.
So, exactly. It sounds like a chaos because you are that body and the organization is that body.
That's great. Of what that reminds me of is emergence takes time, right? If you leave a system alone, over time it will emerge, but there's no predicting when that's going to happen. But I think that what we can do is, if we want to experiment, we can fence off a field, right? And start populating it with conditions that will maybe enable the process to happen more quickly or with some specific constraints. So I love that analogy, and I think that it's not hopeless.
You think that it is hopeless or is not hopeless? I don't know what you just said.
I think it's not. No, I think it's not hopeless.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sorry.
I could toss a coin at any given moment and go one way or the other.
Hopeless, not hopeless. Me too.
So I just want to add something. I think that the premise that it doesn't work and that it's hopeless and that it's failing is a binary statement. And I think most binary statements are missing the point.
Yeah.
I think we're moving slowly. We're moving in the rhythm that the system is ready to move.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, Susan and I were going to say at the top of this, which we forgot to say, so the title was intentionally provocative, right? we're wanting to see who's going to show up for this and who will have a take on it. And so that's what we wanted to hear a bunch of takes. But you're right. I don't think either one of us really hold it as binary. And in fact, where my hope comes from is a very, very long evolutionary time perspective. And from that perspective, this is all perfect. Let's hear from you, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, so many great things that are popping up here that resonate with the Taoism and the different, the approaches and the struggles. And I've worked in a company that was trying to go Teal. I've tried to coach people in the Teal practices. I've tried to coach people in lean startup. And I kept wondering, why wouldn't some of these things work? Why wouldn't some of these things fit? Why are some people not able to make that jump or that transition? So for me, I started digging down even further and had a bunch of different hypotheses. I looked at some of the research. I went back to Claire Graves, who created the spiral dynamics that Integral and all the other things were built on top of. And one of the things that really stood out for me and what he put together was that over every single time he ran his experiments, people had to transition from one mindset to the next, and then from that mindset to the next, and that mindset to the next. And they could never jump multiple mindsets. No one could ever fast forward it. You had to have the learning of the next mindset in order to unlock the next one. So I took that for myself and started looking at, and it's one thing I've been doing over the past several years. So I've taken some hypotheses and turned it into, to use the scientific terminology, a theory based on some of those concepts. And I think that there is this thing that we call it the Agile mindset with the people I work with, of understanding the team dynamics. And it kind of has to do with spheres of awareness. So people getting out of their own head and just interacting with other people in the team and being willing to put aside their own ego to help the team to grow. Then there's the teams of teams working together in order to build a product. And that's kind of that shift from project to product kind of mindset. And then those people are learning that doesn't matter what my team is doing, it's how I fit into this larger whole. It's how I fit into these other pieces. Then there's beyond that, like multiple teams working together in an organization that's sort of that has to make money, that has to survive, that has to keep everybody employed. And that's where lean startup really starts to emerge and really play. And so that's like another expanding thing of that. And we've been calling that the shift from product to people. And then after that, there's a shift. Once you understand that you can look at customers and people and you're no longer thinking about product, then you have the ability to be able to start looking at some of these Teal practices. And that gets into some of these areas that sociocracy is playing in. And we've got even conscious capitalism is taking us into that space. And it's like, for me, I'm seeing this pattern of this larger sphere of influence that you can actually hold more things in your brain. And at that point, you can hold multiple opposite things in your brain at the same time that are antithetical to each other, but can both be true at the same time. And that, I believe, gets you into the place where you actually can get to Teal. And if you try to jump those steps, you can't. And that's why I think it hasn't lived up to it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you're actually showing it to us in real time here, because just the way you talk about being able to hold multiple perspectives at once, even those that are contradictory to one another, that is a hallmark of the altitude that we call teal or yellow in spiral dynamics, right? It's not in previous levels of adult development. That's not, it's not that it's not desired. It's just actually not even very possible, or maybe not possible at all. So, we're seeing this now. There are huge portions of our populations in many of our nations that are living at an amber or amber orange altitude, and I encounter it in people of my parents' generation very frequently. That I'll take them into a conversation and they literally cannot take my perspective. They cannot do it. So you're right. It's a long game of all of these adults developing themselves, and of course, an adult can stop at any point, right? I just think the tragedies in the coming years are going to continue to help us develop those of us who are wanting to continue to do this and to participate with the difficulty. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved watching your mind, Pete. That's what I was aware of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love watching everybody else's mind. I'm going to duck out so somebody else can step up.
Yeah,
I just want to add a small anecdote before I fade out that I thought of. Imagine that, let's take the analogy of a washing machine. And imagine that you have tons of white shirt and you put a teal shirt there, right? The more you put a teal shirt in your washing, the more the taint goes into the other clothes. But every fabric has its own dynamics, right? So some shirts will do it very fast and some will stay resistant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and every fabric has its own integrity. I mean, a way in which it's perfectly all right as it is.
Yeah. So that was nice.
I like that washing machine analogy, though.
What do you think, Corinna?
Well, I was coming in response to some of what Pete was talking about and thinking about mindsets. And to me, there's a lot that sits in this around like what are our kind of the paradigms on which we build our lenses of the world. And one of the things that I've always found interesting, and if I'm honest, slightly off-putting about kind of the scrum, the coaching, that language that sits there, which is why to me it's quite distant from Teal, is that comes from a gaming mindset fundamentally built on competition, right? So I must have a belief in the world that competition is the way to get ahead. And I actually, as someone who's not from the US, I'm always fascinated by the US's obsession with sports. But it is a very competitive sport framework, and in which there is a worldview there that to me is actually opposed to where we look to go with Teal, as I experience Teal. And so just that play, I do agree with this shifting of mindsets, but I actually think our language is really important, and it frames the way that we see the world as well. And so that's one of the things I get very stuck on when I hear kind of the scrums and coaching and all these other pieces. And I also, to build on that, I think I think this is something you mentioned, Susan, that we love a 3-minute, like an idea is not worthwhile unless we can put it in a 3-minute elevator pitch, or we have a 1, 2, 3 step process. And I think there's this tendency, because we want certainty, to go for products and programs, and as you said, codify everything. And the way I see Teal cultures working is that it is the people, the emergent process, and the place. What do these people in this place have to say and process that then informs the products and the programs that emerge? And I think we continue to have that the wrong way. We continue to lead with program and product.
Yeah, I love that, the emergence of the unique potential, right? Because it's not codifiable. We know this. Even if we had the exact same people in this fishbowl construct tomorrow, the emergent qualities of it would be different. And I don't know why that reality is chosen to be ignored so much.
Well, I think it goes back to the power question, right? The way we've built structures is one of the dominant forms of power is the expert power that has the answers to all. And if that's the way we honor power, then we cannot do that until we actually do other forms of power.
Joyce lit up on that one.
Yeah, I was really interested in what Susan had to say about the power dynamics that we put a pin in. And because that's kind of something I've found emerging in my Agile practice, that there's an inherent disparity, or at least a perceived disparity in power. And when product owners or even Scrum Masters ask that something happens, the team usually feels constrained and feels they can't say no, which is not how, by the book, it's supposed to work. And I was very intrigued by the question of, okay, when it's not working the way that the book says, what are we supposed to do? You know, and I know a good Agile coach is supposed to go in and say, okay, wait a second, time out. Again, a sports analogy. Things aren't working the way they're supposed to. Let's all remember what's, you know, a product owner's role and what's a Scrum Master's role. But in many organizations, because of the other functions these people may serve, I think that they are loaded. You know, I know that's true in my organization. And I think in particular, because my organization is a consulting organization, so our customer is our product owner, it's very hard to say no to someone who's paying the bill, especially when you're up for contract recompete in 2 months and you're trying to impress them. So, you know, those things get all mixed up with the decision making that may not be at the best interest of the software, the product, the team, the people, the happiness. And I haven't figured out how to do that. I think really good teams with really good track records do, and they have great relationship with product owner and they manage it. But I think it can be very, very troublesome, especially in that client relationship, to balance out how is agility supposed to fit in here so that we can make sure the people can realize their potential in high performing teams and some of the Teal attributes of an organization.
I want to recognize Ava and Ron who've come in, and I want to respond to this a little bit before we hear more that takes us in a different direction, because I think there's a lot to unpack here in the power. You know, I think of so many things that Agile does as creating, I think Susan said earlier, let's fence off a field and say that in this field, there's going to be some self-organization. And in order to make that safe in an organization that's not really jiving with the whole thing, here are some practices, right? And so and here are some roles, you know, and so we have these role definitions. And I think that what they're trying to do, and I think about product owner and Scrum Master in particular, and what those role definitions are trying to do is to locate the decision power at the source.
Yes.
At the role where it's the most immediate, there's the most downstream impact, consequence for good or for bad. That person is the person who's going to suffer that consequence. So there's like a real sense of not just sort of doing a job, but having a real felt sense of ownership and pride and stick to itness, you know?
Yep.
Now, those are training wheels. What we didn't do was tell, maybe I didn't do, what I didn't do was tell everyone, hey, those are just training wheels to get us into this conversation about power, to get us into this explicit conversation. Because the situation you're talking about, Joyce, is like your client is also your product owner. Well, those are actually two roles that
Yes.
that person is occupying relative to your consulting company, right? And if Agile is going to continue to flower into this bucket of things we call Teal, then that could become a transparent conversation.
Oh yeah.
You know, and I think that is so amazing, and that there are people in the world practicing these Teal practices. And that's why I love my connection with Susan so much, because she's one of them and I learn from her all the time. You know, I narrated the book that she co-authored called Lead Together, and that's where I learned about like all of these little scaffolding handholds to actually get into the depth of some of these things that Agile just sort of created an interruption pattern for. Yeah. So
and I think there's a bit about Agile that also has some preconditions that we gloss over. You know, like you can't just plunk it in and expect it's going to work. You know, there's this expectation that you have skilled people, that you have people that are comfortable acting in self-managing behaviors, all of those sorts of things. So that's not always the case.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Joyce. We neglected to tell everyone that we set a timer for half of our fishbowl time, and it just went off. Where Susan and I are going to have sort of a transparent conversation in front of all y'all, and also probably hear from you, like how this is going. Would you give us some info in chat about how this is going for you so far? And Ava and Ron, please know we have not forgotten that you are with us now. So Susan, what's up? What are you sensing?
Yeah, I just consider this lifting the lid on the fishbowl. I am very energized by the fact that the 5 seats seem to be taken all the time. And I think that I love the back channel in the chat as well. So to be able to read and interact with both things at once is great. Also recognizing that this conversation has got so many possibilities. And also being in this position of just being a participant in the fishbowl and not trying to lead or guide the conversation is a development edge for me. So I'm noticing that. What about you, Lisa?
I have developmental edge. Yeah, I'm noticing that I'm enjoying hearing many voices, and I'm appreciating how the ball's getting tossed around. And this is what I was hoping for, at least for myself personally, and for what we could instigate for everyone else. I'm just now seeing your message, Susan, that we said this was 2 hours and not 90 minutes. That's hilarious. So good news, we have more time. Oh, that's so awesome. Well, and so that's apropos of my developmental edge, actually, which is just sitting in the place where I'm letting go of a lot of the structures and a lot of the knowing and a lot of the holding the skeleton of things, just discovering that we now have 2 hours instead of 90 minutes and like that not being a big panic, or I don't have a lot of judgment about myself about not knowing that, even though I'm the one who actually set it up in the ticket system that way, So I think this is going fine. So how is this going for you all out there? Give us some sense of how this is going, good, bad, or indifferent. And then we're also going to start to move back in and hear Ava and others. Got a lovely. Yeah, people are having interesting language. Yeah. I just clicked over to the live stream. People are there. They're saying lovely so far, and that they're getting, they're having questions over there that they're chatting with each other about. That's really awesome. Yeah, so energizing, thought-provoking, curious about where it's going to go. Yeah, great. So any adjustments to make, Susan? We're just keep on keeping on.
I'm feeling good. I'm going to put the fishbowl lid back down.
Okay, back in.
Being a goldfish.
You're being the goldfish. I love it.
I wanted to question the assumption, like the statement, and maybe I think you mentioned you made the statement to kind of as a trigger of the Teal promise of Agile, and I don't know if there ever was. In as much as if I define Agile as being the birth of the Agile Manifesto, and we had a bunch of middle-aged white guys that were predominantly developers, I think other than 2 of them, that found out a better way for writing software for a team. And really it was one team, one product at that time, and it worked really well at that. And so from that, they created this thing. So my introduction to Agile was being on an XP team and falling in love with that way of working and realizing how it had made me a better person. And I thought that was truly remarkable. Not only was this the right way to help my company write great software, it had a deeper impact on the people that were involved. A book that was getting recommended around that time through the community was The 7-Day Weekend by Ricardo Semler. So I just picked that up because everyone's like, hey, you got to read this book. And that touched me in a very, very deep way.
And that was my introduction to Teal. I didn't even know the word Teal then, but to me, that was my introduction. So Agile led me to Teal, and recognizing, hey, yeah, this thing that's happening in this team here, that can happen at a much larger scale. And look at what can happen in this example of Semco. What would happen if an organization were to take these beautiful concepts of people and interactions and self-organization, because I think they're the two elements in the manifesto that are Teal-like, and to expand on them. And that kind of brought me hope. So Agile took me to Teal, and the circle kind of has been completed now as an Agile coach, being a recovering Agile coach, being frustrated of being able to touch people and teams with this beautiful thing, only to have it squashed and crushed by an orange organization, and that they're sitting in. So like my personal journey is like, I don't forget about Agile. Start with Teal, because unless you change your organization, Agile is going to be a local optimization at best. And the promise of agility, you're not going to realize it, because you're going to misinterpret it as a process, right? And sure, there is a process to it, but the real magic, the magic is always in the soft stuff. And isn't that incredible? Every time you read something about, oh, this company is doing these amazing things, and what was the cause of it? It always comes down to the soft stuff, to the people and interactions. And yet when we go and implement things, it's always the hard stuff. Here's the process. Here's the role of the product owner, versus the soft stuff of where's the psychological safety, what's our onboarding practices, what's our offboarding practices, all of these kind of things.
Yeah, I just really feel you in that journey of discovering this amazing thing. Agile, it puts up some fences, and then all of a sudden new things are impossible, are now possible. And then discovering Teal, and like, oh, like this is sort of where we're headed. I mean, so I get one of the good pieces of news that I see is that sort of doesn't matter what happens with Agile or organizations or whatever, like the arrow, the trajectory of societal evolution is Teal and beyond that into turquoise and on and on. What we can see right now is Teal in like the very beginnings of turquoise, perhaps. And we also are seeing in society a backsliding, right? Because that's what happens when humans are under stress. We sort of go to the what feels like the more known things, even though, and they feel like they're safe, but they're actually not. But that's what we do. So the arrow of evolution is just keeps moving us this way. And so, Ron, you just made me realize that I had forgotten that, and it gives me a little bit of like a sort of a resilient hope. Yeah, not a hope based on like, I hope things are going to go well, or I have a false sense of optimism, but sort of like a more resilient hope. Ava, I'd love to hear you. Yeah. Come on
in. This is so timing, because what I've seen so far is that, just what Susan and Lisa have described. First of all, leaders are human too, but a lot of time folks may have thought that what get them here will get them there, but it doesn't always work like that, because the time is changing a lot. So without having a self-awareness about how they behave and how they think, it's really hard, it's really hard to adapt to this new environment with uncertainty. And Lisa also mentioned about that development as well. It's interesting to me because we're all human first. We all have emotion, but seems like there's a model that we need to have that cognitive thinking, and that's how we can be successful. And yes, it can, but sometimes it put us into that problem solving mode that doesn't really get us into the feeling, the emotion underneath it. And if leaders don't have that self-awareness to understand what they're feeling underneath, what are they really trying to protect, how might they lead organizations and people to create that psychology safety for everyone involved, including themselves. So that's how I feel that Agile doesn't work, because Agile is very good at surface what doesn't work and create that transparency, but it doesn't mean that it create the pathway or it's a solution. It's more like, yeah, now we know what we didn't know, what are we going to do about it, and how well are we as conscious humans and leaders and aware of our own feelings and emotions so that we can lead the organizations.
I want to underline something you said that just really struck my heart. Like, how do we create psychological safety for everyone, including ourselves as leaders? That feels to me like a really, you had several really good questions in a row there. That feels like a really important one, because I don't think it is safe for most leaders to lead this way.
Yeah. And another thing is that, like, in organizations, when things don't work well, often there's blame and shame, and leaders, sometimes they blame themselves and shame themselves too, but in private. So they're not able to create that psychology safety for themselves, to be vulnerable, to be open up enough to influence or to inspire others to do the same. So it's like, as a professional coach and consultant, I'm living in both worlds. Like, sometimes I have to consult, sometimes I really have to go deep into the coaching. But helping leaders to have the time to sit down, like taking one step backward so that they can go 2 steps forward, having that awareness changes everything. And also create that objective view of the system thinking too. So it's not just to blame anyone, but thinking about that we're all in the same system. We're all going to influence one another, especially leaders have that large influence. Even if they cough, they have their influence on the people underneath them. So how can we create an environment where leaders can also feel safe and open up and lead by example, and help teams to have that experimentation and learning forward? So in the end, I feel like what helped with my job the most is just to make sure that I bring in that objectivity when I look at the system thinking and system coaching in the organization.
Thanks for sharing that, Ava. It really spoke to me as well when you talked about the psychological safety for leaders, because I think we might get that at small team level, a team lead or a product owner or development lead may be willing to step up and say, I messed up or whatever. But I think it's really hard if you've got somebody who's, a marketing director or somebody who's responsible for people and having to make tough decisions. And then when you look in society, it's probably even bigger. And we all bring our whole selves, our wounded whole selves to work. And at those times when things aren't going well, we tend to remember all the things we've done wrong. We bring all the hurts we've had with us, and that makes us less resilient. And it's at a time when we need to be our most resilient. So That's a great observation. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
The psychological safety thing grabbed me. I just wanted to hop back in because I had an interesting experience with a group of Agile coaches. And some folks were having some issues with psychological safety. And so they wanted to bring this up and start introducing some psychological safety, some conscious look at psychological safety. And I thought this was going to be a slam dunk for a bunch of Agile coaches. And we actually got overruled. And the majority of the Agile coaches actually said, no, we don't want to do psychological safety work. We believe that if you do the process work, psychological safety will come. And so we just need to do more of the process work. And we're like, we've been doing the process work and it hasn't been leading to psychological safety, which is why we want to attack it head on. And they were adamant, and it just became this big blow up kind of conversation. So yeah, I found that interesting just to add into the mix. And then also the way I use my method is I just took the people who were interested in it. We went off in our own little bubble and we worked on that. And then I did listening exercises with the other group to try to get them to practice taking the other person's point of view, because there is an obvious need for that mindset shift to make way for psychological safety.
Pete, you're reminding me, I think a lot of people don't actually know that the Agile frameworks are intentionally incomplete. They are, and this is a phrase I heard years and years ago, and it just, whoa, yes, of course they are, but they are intentionally incomplete, meaning that there are other allied disciplines that we need to bring in to enliven the values and the principles that these Agile frameworks are trying to express, right? Like our ability to become aware of and create more psychological safety, like our ability to teach people how to have a conscious conversation about power and roles. Who's holding what role? What power does it have? What's the relationship of one up, one down? What does it feel like? How do we want to navigate and negotiate it? Like just all of that getting out on the table. I think the Agile frameworks themselves point us to we talked about them being fences, right? They're fences that sort of get us in the ballpark of being able to do that, but don't guarantee that we can. I think it's up to us. I'm really happy for you as a practitioner, that you're doing that, because I think that's what's necessary, but I also think it's what was inevitable.
I think so. If I can toss something real quick, and then I want to hand it over, hear Salim's voice, that one of the things that I'm tired of the framework wars. And so I've been gathering a bunch of people around me that are also tired of the framework wars. And one of the things that we've been doing up at the Library of Agile is listing collections of things and then showing, here's how you do it in Scrum, here's how you do it in Safe, here's how you do it in Kanban, here's how you do. There's so many different ways to do a bunch of things. It's just a matter of, are you doing this thing? You probably, if not, find one way to do it, but find the way that works for you. I think that's so important to not get locked in to anyone.
Yeah, and Joyce is saying the same thing in the chat. Scrum Guide is only about 30 pages. You have to put the flesh on the bones and breathe life into it. And that's just about Scrum, but all those other frameworks you mentioned are the same way too. They're all trying to express something inherently human. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been thinking about how when we talk about Agile, we talk about like the manifesto, we talk about the frameworks, but in practice, what I'm seeing is that when you have a team that is actually Agile, it is because there are a couple of people in the team, usually more than one, who have this, I would call it like the hacker mindset. So they are questioning things. They are looking at ways to break the rules, to bend the rules. And I think it might be like inherent that the people who came up with the manifesto shared this mindset, but they weren't completely aware that is not like a universal way of looking at the world. So they wrote like this manifesto that could be applied by hackers and people who have that drive and who have that psychological safety that is inherent to them, that they behave in this way, that they break the rules and they see what they can get away with. And a lot of people do not do that. Like the people I coach mostly, it's not about the problem that they don't have the power. Like they are given the roles, they're given the positions, they are given the coaching, they're given the space, but they still do not use their voice, they do not use their power. So they lack the role models. So for agile transformations, we don't talk a lot about who were the champions, because when I do coaching, I am not at the forefront of the transformation. I am like helping people, I'm helping the team, I'm helping the individuals, but usually from within the organization, there is somebody who has some sort of hacker tendencies, who becomes this champion, who shows people that it is possible to break the rules and get away with it, to question power, to find new ways of discussing about how we are working together. And
I love that. And I'm curious, like in your experience, what happens to those humans, right? Do they come and, spread their questions and energies in the system, and then it reaches a point where the system then triggers its antibodies and throws them out? Or does the system then start to absorb them and dampen their power? Or are they able to persist in this posture of being the disruptors?
My experience is that they either end up like finding a better job in another company, or then they end up in the C-suite, and then they don't have the time to be a positive role, more force for change anymore, or they end up being agile coaches somewhere else.
Yeah, what Susan's bringing in and what you're bringing in too. So it just reminds me of like, there is, this conversation impacts us personally. And so far in this conversation, we've been talking a lot about it being agile, it being teal, it being future work, whatever the its are. And I'm wanting to shape us in the direction of, and shape myself also in the direction of, so what is the impact to us, to each of us individually? Like how, maybe that's just the question. I'm sort of grappling here, but yeah. So we're in this big world, agile, teal, future work, societal change, adult development, Tao, Eastern philosophy in general. Like, what's the impact of being in this world on us?
I think there was some clues to it in the chat around agile coach rehab.
Oh yeah, I forgot I'd seen that before. Yeah, and Pete, this might not have been why you came in. So
it's related in some ways, but what you were just saying there, Salim, was reminding me of a story that I didn't know, but Claire Graves, after he did all of his studies inside of the university, then took it to apply it in businesses. And he said, if you wanted to find the yellow people, go to the building on the far outside of the campus of whatever organization you're working on, or the building, whatever office is far enough away. Like, those people just don't want to be involved in any of the political stuff and the maneuvering, all that kind of stuff. And they'll be off there inventing some fantastic, wonderful thing, applying all of these techniques and working in 5 times, 10 times faster, and rolling out more innovative, but they can't do it inside of the regular structure. And I think that's one of these things, is like creating these pockets or creating these safe spaces for people who want to do this stuff, I think has to be an important part of coaching or approaching this, that I honestly feel it's impossible at this stage to create these safe and teal kind of spaces across an entire organization. I think you have to lift a few people up a step at a time and create a space for those people who want to be teal or yellow to go off and play and have fun and do some awesome stuff without getting bogged down by the rest of the organizational hierarchy.
But you also, sorry.
Yeah, well, I just want to say, unless we stop propping up those organizations with our good efforts.
We could do that too.
But you also need to share share those stories and share that like that experience and share that role modeling of like whatever skunk works they are, and like share the experience of questioning power and not being punished, and making it like obvious that you are empowered to ask questions and to role model it, to tell the story, to share it.
You asked the question of what's the implication of us being in this world on us, and like that's why I turned my video on again. Again, like I take my understanding of the Taoist perspective. If I am a part of a much bigger world, and then my personal destiny is much less important to me than the destiny of the world, which means that I don't care if I'm fired. I am not punishable. I am there to serve and not to get a salary. And when I come with this posture, then I think there's much less conflict. So you go to where you feel you're needed, and when the system says that it doesn't need you, you don't take it personally.
Oh, but come on.
Yeah.
So in my better enlightened days, when I've got all my resources on board and I'm feeling pretty whole, I'm with you. I touch into that as well. And then there are days when I'm just in despair on the floor.
Of course, that's because you're human. I'm speaking from a place where I was thrown out of an organization last week.
Mm-hmm.
And still, I'm sort of grateful for that, because every time I'm thrown out, it means that there's a better place. There's a place where I'm more suitable to be. And not only that, usually when this happens is after I feel that I gave enough for the place to maintain something.
Yeah. I can feel your faith in that.
Me too.
Mm-hmm.
I often feel in similar places where I've gotten, to use your phrase, tossed out of a place, and then was very worried about it, but the place that I ended up falling into was better, and gave me more opportunities and opened up more doors for me. So yeah, it's hard to not feel fear sometimes, but if you can get past that fear and eventually, be friends with that fear, and that fear can start to go away, you start to realize that there can always be something better next, if you're looking for it. I was also inspired to hop in by your statement there, Lisa, because you're supporting the other organizations that are doing like the good things. This is the thing that's been in my head recently. And I kind of want to find all of those places that are doing this stuff the right way. And usually the hardest part is sustainability, and put those visible. So those people who care about this, if you want to buy a thing, instead of going to Amazon or instead of going to Google and picking out a thing that you don't know what kind of processes they follow inside. And you don't know if they have this mindset or not. Like you could go see if you could go to this, we'll call it a teal marketplace or whatever we want to call it, you know, the yellow marketplace or the conscious marketplace, and see if there's a company there who holds your same values and has that product, and then you can buy it from them and give your money to them.
And you could go work for them.
And you can go work for them.
Yeah, Catherine is asking a good question. Is a B Corp trying to be that? And probably a B Corp, for those of you who don't know, stands for Benefit Corp. It's where it's a for-profit corporation, but hooked to a not-for-profit. And so the profits flow into the not-for-profit cause. And
I find I can't predict that. If there's a B Corp, they may be doing some great things and donating, but it's the same thing with nonprofits. Behind the cover, when you go in, I've worked with some nonprofits and they are not working in a very conscious, safe kind of environment, but they're doing awesome things in the community. And there's always this thing, and you see people that are, you're like, oh, this company's awesome. You know, they're having this impact and Y impact, and they're doing all these wonderful things. And then you go talk to an employee, and they're like, my God, I'm about to die here. This culture is so oppressive. And they are doing as much damage inside the company psychologically as they are doing benefit outside the company. And there's no correlation.
yeah, we pretty much suck at human relationship skills, like sort of across the board, I would say. And I think if I boil it all down, that's sort of what we're trying to learn right now. Maybe that's the reason we move through green, and then green becomes a little bit too stifled by consensus, not enough agency or autonomy, and we move into teal in our own development trajectory.
I was curious about stepping back a couple of steps, that I'm curious about why psychological safety always seems to be correlated with failure and mistakes rather than the opportunity to talk about potential and maybe dreams is too strong of a word, but things that are less about, oh, I'm afraid to do this because it's going to hurt, to, oh, I'm afraid to do this because I might spark something new and take us in a different direction.
That goes along with that Marianne Williamson quote that it's not our darkness that scares us, it's our light. You know, it's the upside that we're really sort of afraid to capture. And I think that I see it all the time in the people I coach, like their capacity for holding and for increasing joy in their lives and even in their own bodies is far less than their capacity for holding pain. You know, and so maybe this is a big practice we need to bring in. I like this. I like that idea, Susan. Like, what's the upside of it?
Yeah, I mean, what the idea of it really touched me, the story that you told Pete about the group that you were working with, where they said, no, we don't want to do psychological safety practices if we just do the routines and the systems to the T, eventually we'll be psychologically safe. It's like, for me, I probably would have, well, I'd like to think that I would have said, gentlemen, I'm not the coach for you. Because I think that willful blindness of the relational field is going to constrain things so significantly. And I'm curious, what do you think they were afraid of? Like, why were they so like, no, we are not going to do this like psychological safety training or try to even go there? What were they afraid of?
It's a good question. And I can't really sort of give an insight into where their brains are at, because there were certain things. Let me just say it this way, that the pattern that I was able to notice from the outside in is that there were several people there who were really, let me say it this way, then I'll put my guess on it to answer your question. They were really pushing a framework and an approach because it was their belief that this framework would solve this thing. And they were afraid that if anything changed and their framework got disrupted, then their experiment would have gotten disrupted and then they would have failed. And so it was, I believe, a fear of failure. A bunch of that is just guesses on my point of view. But there were several people who I think were like, they were really trying to prove themselves and show themselves to, you know, have value. And they felt like, if I don't get a chance to do the thing that I'm intending to do, then because of this, I'm losing something. And for me, it very much resonated with all the work that I've done with entrepreneurs who are very much baked into their idea. And if they're so worried that if my idea doesn't exist or my idea doesn't succeed, then I do not succeed. And I have to really separate them from, you as an entrepreneur is different than your idea. Your ideas will fail 9 out of 10 times. A good entrepreneur will iterate through 9 bad ideas until they find the one good idea and then scale it. But you got to be able to separate yourself. And I'm not sure, I don't know for certain, but I'm not sure that they could separate themselves at that point.
And isn't it hard for anyone, really? I mean, you have to have a lot of just emotional maturity to have somebody else watching that process going on, and invite them to watch it. We tend to sometimes keep shields up, even with people that are close to us, about what we're willing to share or expose or how vulnerable we're willing to be. And I do think it's interesting what you said, Lisa, about our potential to feel joy, because I think a lot of us, you know, some people have mentioned every time that I've had an opportunity dry up, I end up in a place that turns out to be more interesting or better or a growth opportunity. And I think for many of us, it ends up being, well, until somebody pushed me out the door, I knew it was a bad situation and I wasn't happy. But until somebody gave me the boot, I wasn't unhappy enough, or I didn't have the guts to just go and say, all right, I've had it, I'm going to try something different. And I think that you know, it's inertia. It's, nobody wants to fail publicly, especially when you're not sure if you've got support. It takes a lot to know whether your peers and your team are competitive, if they're going to comfort you, support you, applaud you, let you take a failure bow, whatever the custom is. Or if it's going to be great, that framework failed, that means there's 3 coaching slots open and now it's, you know, blood in the water. So you just don't know what the culture is. And you've always got people on the outside watching that maybe aren't bought into the whole, let's do things in an agile way. And they're looking at bottom lines and wondering why we've got all these coaches in the first place and what the heck do they do all day? So there's a lot of pressure, I think, for people, even though we try to deny it, to continue to look good. And to fail in certain ways is okay, maybe, but other ways is a bigger risk. And I think it also ties into what Ava was saying about, you know, leadership and resilience and being comfortable with how you bring yourself to work. I mean, I know that, you know, the last, week, with all the Supreme Court decisions, I was very unsettled here in the US. We had like 4 decisions in a row that really kind of have the potential to change some of our laws. And it just unsettled me at a really deep level. Regardless of the politics, I was just kind of like, wow, some of these are really big change. And it made it very hard for me to focus on work. And even when I tried to bring myself to work, and tried not to pay attention to Twitter or Facebook or whatever else was going on in the news, it was very hard for me to say, okay, I'm just going to be cognitive right now and not feel these things. And maybe if I had been in an office instead of a remote setting, I could have processed some of that stuff and gotten it out faster. But it definitely impacted the self I brought to work that week and my capacity. It was almost like a trauma, a minor trauma, and definitely would have pushed me back down the scale of how I relate to people and made me feel more defensive, or maybe, you know, all of those things would have been triggered and kicked up because of something that happened by 9 people voting on a court case. It, you know, in a way, it doesn't make a big it's an obvious connection, but it definitely affected how I worked. And I think that happens to a lot of us. I mean, to get into psychological safety, you have people coming to work every day that are dealing with a divorce or a troubled kid or an aging parent who needs support or whatever, money problems. And those things have nothing to do with their job per se, but it's affecting who they are that day. And that's what I think is missing in the human relations, is just how we help those people be whole and safe before they can even be safe in a group, how they can be safe themselves.
I absolutely agree, Joyce. And what's coming up for me is like, when I'm thinking about not trying to solutionize, but like what I dreamed was that Agile Teal connection, right? So come in and you do your stand-up ceremony, right? And you're almost always talking about what you did yesterday, what you're going to do today, what blockers are. What would happen in the system if you took an extra 30 seconds to put some warm data into the room, which is like, I had a really bad night's sleep last night. I might not be fully on my game today. Or I had a great run, I'm full of energy. Or my toddler has their third ear infection in 2 months, and I need to sort this out, right? What is that tiny little step that we can take that builds on what we already have, that can start bringing some of that humanness and that, I love to call it, warm data into the room, because it's all information, right? My pushback so much, like when I'm coming into organizations and like suggesting a check-in is one of the initial micro practices. It's like, well, it's too touchy-feely. No, it's actually data, guys. Sorry, I'm weird that I said guys when that came out. Probably not a Freudian slip. But
we're all women in the fishbowl right now.
I mean, but what could it be like if we just took that tiny little baby step to say one thing about how we're landing today?
And it doesn't have to be totally revealing.
No,
but it does tell others, how is it going to be to work with me today?
Exactly.
You know, if I didn't have any sleep last night, please don't bring me the toughest problem you've got.
Yeah.
You know, I can get through the day, but I'm not going to be able to sort out your tough problem.
And that's not super vulnerable. Like you said,
No.
It doesn't have to be the scariest, deepest thing. Start somewhere.
Yeah.
Corinna's got such a big smile on her face. You're muted.
Thank you. I was just finding it curious listening to you, Joyce, how there is still this the assumption that somehow this work we do is disconnected from the broader society and what's going on. I mean, if this organization or whatever I'm doing shows up and is embedded in this broader society, and there's stuff going on, it is relevant. Like, how is it not relevant? And I just, that whole like work-life balance story is one I find it quite difficult to even relate to when I work in what I would say was a completely Teal way, that it kind of disappears, because suddenly I'm a whole person coming to work, and my work is deeply embedded into the broader purpose I have in life, wherever I happen to show up and whatever I happen to do. And I think it feels very important to give space to that. Having just been in the US working for a bit, like I felt that so much. It was like, here I'm going to compartmentalize this trauma, then this thing that's going on, and then I'm going to like show up and do whatever I have to do and talk about failure in kind of more this tech bro weird way. I don't know. There's just like lots of all this like cognitive dissonance going on. So yeah.
Amen. Cognitive dissonance. Holy moly. Have I been?
I love the tech bro.
Yeah. Yeah, my God, I've been a mess. I have been a mess these last few weeks, y'all. I mean, so definitely what's going on in our surround is part of it for me. I just want to give a verbal shout out to the people who I've been feeling so viscerally, you know, Vicky, Uta, Alexandra, Catherine, everyone else who's been sitting around holding. And you are very welcome to be in the fishbowl if you like. And there's no compulsion, but I just want to make sure you know that you are so welcome. Dove, dove, dove.
Hi everyone. Looking for anything positive because there's been so much trauma. There's some things I'm just consciously not doing. Oh, the news and the newspaper, but really looking for good things. And so I just want to share, in that spirit, I want to share that I have a client and they really successfully do check-ins. And they can go around and they can say, I woke up today with a headache, I'm just not at myself, or whatever this is. And they bring in college interns, and for those interns coming in, it just is an amazing space for them to, number one, learn how to work and how a space can be. And they feel very comfortable, and they really can, in what I've seen, can contribute more because they feel really safe. So it's just like a big shout out that as we're talking about all of these things with old people that they can't change, that I'm just putting a positive spin for young people, that there's hope out there, and they will be changing this. And young organizations, this client is a young organization and just raised 20 million more in seed funding. The young organizations can do with this. So I think, Lisa, you said it, something like, why work at, not pick on anybody, my old employer, HP, why work there? Let's put our energy into organizations that can really feel it. And these young organizations, look at what's happening with the S&P 500. They're not, so many of them from the 50s are not there anymore. So there's a big hope. So I just want to put a little bit of hope in the world, because I'm looking for it wherever I can find it. And I dig deep, but when it's there, it really shines. Mm-hmm. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
And comments.
I jumped in because on the hope part. Hi. So I've been really curious about, how Agile is so focused on software and product, but there's the whole human resource performance management thing that's really blocking people, because that's where the intrinsic motivation is. And I've been hopeful because I found their organization and other coaches that are working in the HR and organization perspective of Agile, and they're coming out with their principle and manifesto. So it's been really eye-opening, and so that's where I'm hopeful, because there's movement. I think I see it more in Europe, not so much in North America. And I also feel hopeful because I've been I went on a few job searches and things like that. I've seen smaller and startup companies using more modern ways of performance, I wouldn't call management, but review and feedback. So they don't tie bonuses to incentives. So that's what I'm hopeful for, but I see it more in younger companies and not in the big companies that I've been in. So I just wanted to share that.
I love it. Let's keep the hope train going. It's so good. I'm so glad you jumped in, Yuju, and also Alexandra. So glad to see both of you. I've been feeling both of you in the surround this whole time, and you've been doing beautiful work for all of us.
I would like to, I know you want more hope, but I've had a not so hopeful moment last week where I'm kind of, so I am an Agile coach in internal audit. And it feels like I am alone in this. So I'm an auditor by profession, 20 years, but I've been a coach now for 6 years. So I've been doing that dedicatedly, which has transformed me as a human being, by the way. Sometimes looking at areas that I'm not quite, like this one of the areas that I noticed, or leadership edge that I noticed, was that I could not be powerfully being in any communication. And what happened is that I was only hearing what I wanted to hear. And as a result, I thought that I'm not impacted by the fact that people may not like this Agile ways of working, that they feel that this is an IT everything, get out of here. This has nothing to do with audit. Just get over yourself. This is never going to last longer than 6 months. And I feel like I'm like throwing these little fishes out at sea, you know, one fish at a time, and it's a big blue sea, and I'm making no difference. And I was literally in tears last week about it. And I've realized is that I have a bit of work to do about how can I be in any communication powerfully and continue putting one foot in front of the other and throwing one fish at a time. So yeah, just being here makes me feel like I'm not loony and losing my head. It just feels like I'm on my own. So yes, so the hope is that I am here. That is the hope.
You are so not alone. You know, I think that maybe that's why I wanted to have this conversation so much and hear from other people, because oftentimes I do feel alone too, even though I know that there are these community places that I can go and that I can also convene something like this. And yeah, it's been great not to be alone. Hey, Susan, we got 5 minutes left.
I'm wondering if we can invite everybody back into the room and like fully lift and be all fishes together.
Yes, we're all fishes swimming in the big, big ocean. I like Ron.
Just turn your video back on.
Yeah, just come on back in. Oh, it's been so good to be with you all. For all of you who participated in any way that you did, with your voice, with your presence, all really important and needed.
I'd love just for us maybe to end with a little chatterfall in chat. And this is the prompt that I'm offering. What do you feel is possible now? And maybe we'll try. Just hit enter when you're ready, and we can kind of see and feel everybody in the space one last time before we leave. Nice. Yeah, keep going, Alina. Being open to the resistors. I love it. Yeah, living a life of meaning and purpose.
Find my tribe. Sharing and amplifying like-minded thoughts and thinkers.
Yeah, finding the people who inspire you and try to work with them. And that's also one of my taglines, and something I feel very privileged is that I do work I love with people I love, and there's no discord or reason why we all can't have that. And to be able to say it, right? Let's use the L word a little bit more.
The L word. Are you talking about love?
I am.
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
Well, I was thinking of love, and then I was trying to come up with other L words. I couldn't think of any. So there you go.
Yeah, nice.
It's funny. I used the word love in a phrase the other week, and everybody else in the business context went like they visibly got like, oh my God, he used the word L.
Right? Yeah,
yeah. I just want to express my love for the minds and hearts and energy fields that showed up here today, and that also showed up on the live stream. There have been like 19 people hanging in with us on the live stream the whole time, and they're chatting too, and they've enjoyed hearing us and participating that way. Gosh, it's good to see your faces. It's really good to be with you.
Yeah,
it's been balm. It's been a balm for me. Yeah.
Second that, like So much gratitude. And where have the 2 hours gone? It's like we're only getting started. I want to get another round of drinks in and keep hanging out. All right. Thanks, everybody. Keep your eye out. Who knows? We might do this again.
Yeah. Go ahead and unmute yourself and say goodbye to each other.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.